Let me ask you a question, and I genuinely want to know your answer. How did you find webtoons? I think there are a few ways that most people found webtoons. One of the biggest ways, I think, is through word of mouth. Spreading your favorite webtoons by telling your friends, your family members, even internet friends. Or maybe people told you about webtoons. There are a few smaller ways that you might have discovered webtoons though. Maybe you got convinced by one of their really weird and, I'll be honest, kind of bad ads, whether it be on Instagram or YouTube. Or it could be that you found the author and then discovered their webtoons. A few authors started on DeviantArt and even YouTube. The author of Down to Earth, Pookie Senpai, has done a number of really well done and funny Game Grumps, Jacksepticeye, and even Markiplier animations. And you should definitely check those out if you haven't. But that's besides the point. There are a number of ways that you could find webtoons. Now, there is another reason, and I think it's one of the biggest ways. I didn't bring it up because while it applies to the overall question, how did you find webtoons, it's different from the question, what was your first webtoon? I presented those three because they all kind of lead to one of the most discussed webtoon clusters. A cluster I'm calling story webtoons. Your Unordinaries, your Lore Olympuses, your Blood Inks, your Hardcore Leveling Warriors. These webtoons have a lot of different things about them. Literally tons of different aspects to each of their stories. From their general messages to their stories to even what kind of genres they are. But they're all story webtoons. By story webtoons, I mean webtoons that are primarily driven by story, plot, by the character dialogue, by the character development, and their interactions. To many, these webtoons are basically most of the webtoons, or at least most of the popular ones. And it makes sense. If you or your friends were to recommend a webtoon, it'll probably be one of these story-driven ones. One of these ones with conflict and interest and intrigue. If you got an ad for a webtoon, it's probably one of the ones that I've stated before. Because I've gotten ads for Unordinary, Blood Ink, and even City of Blanks on Instagram. The point is that it's pretty easy to pitch webtoons with these epic stories, these interesting and complex narratives, these narrative stories to people who might be interested. However, like I said before, there's a relatively popular way that people got into webtoons. And it's actually one of the ways I got into webtoons. Nonsense. Nonsense webtoons is the name that I lovingly give webtoons like My Giant Nerd Boyfriend, Adventures of God, Safely Endangered, or Waffle and Pancakes. Webtoons like these have characters, and sometimes have multiple chapter specials, but not often. More often than not, they're meant to be funny, meant to be picked up and read, no matter where you are, no matter what chapter you start, no matter which platform you are, whether it be Instagram, Reddit, or even Pinterest. These webtoons don't need context. They don't need special interest in any of the other webtoons, or anything else. If you see any of these chapters in any form of media content, you'll enjoy it just as much if you've read all the chapters. Watch. I eat 3 reasonably portioned meals per day.
I forget to eat for a whole day, then totally binge out. This one time I ate 2 entire large pizzas. The locals actually have a funny nickname for me. What was it, Juan?
El Chupacabra. Have any of you read Blue Chair? It doesn't matter if you have or haven't, because to me, that was still extremely funny. But that brings us to the point of the video. Or I guess to the person of the video. The author, Sheen. If you've watched my recent video, then you'll notice I'm talking more about webtoons in general. Life lessons, messages, morals, ideals. This way I can talk more about other webtoons. Which brings us to Sheen, an extremely active author. The author of Blue Chair, which updates twice a week and has over 800 chapters. He has a separate webtoon called Sheen Comics, for some strange reason, with about 70 chapters. He started a story-ish webtoon called Live With Yourself. And he, along with another webtoon author, made about 100 chapters. Publishes separate art to his Instagram. He's even kickstarting his own board game called Your Friend Is Sad. And you bet that I back this, and I will play it when it comes out. The point is that the man is busy, and that busyness got him on the main page multiple times. To a certain extent, it's difficult not to know Sheen in his work, but that got me a little curious. Why? I know I've been asking why a lot, but I'm a curious person. Webtoons has a lot of webtoons, and that's both really broad and not broad at all. Webtoons can be compared to YouTube in a strange way, where anyone can really post anything if you're dedicated enough. But even though Webtoons has a ton of different creators, it feels more specific. It feels more personal. And a lot of the popular webtoons are like the ones I mentioned before, the story webtoons. Webtoons driven by character, story, drama, plot, and such. It's difficult to enjoy nonsense webtoons for the same reason that you would enjoy story webtoons. Yes, you might be able to, but it'll be weird if you liked Unordinary, Lore Olympus, Hardcore Leveling Warrior, or Blood Ink for the same reason you liked Blue Chair. Blue Chair is in a constant state of inconsistency, constantly throwing different curveballs in weird scenarios. I just dubbed one with Sheen before, but there aren't that many chapters that don't have one of the main characters, that don't typically involve Sheen. The point is that there are no rules. Unlike a series like Unordinary, where there are normal rules and ideals on how the world works, none of that exists here. There are no rules to how the world of Blue Chair works, or how Sheen Comics works. Unlike the worlds of Unordinary, Lore Olympus, or any other story-driven webtoon, Blue Chair isn't driven by the world. In fact, there's barely a world, it's more like a void. It's driven by the rules of the characters. Now, you might be a little confused, thinking that Unordinary, Lore Olympus, Hardcore Leveling Warrior, and any other webtoons are driven by characters, and you wouldn't be wrong. Characters are an integral piece of any entertainment. Having a character is how a story continues, but it's not typically what a story is about. Story webtoons focus on how the characters are impacted by the world. There's a reason why I mentioned Unordinary, Lore Olympus, Hardcore Leveling Warrior, and even Blood Ink. As Blood Ink is a webtoon I have yet to mention, but it's still important and still relates to the whole idea of the world impacting people. Because as important as the main cast are, it doesn't mean a story can't be made without them. Unordinary has an in-between season with Ray. Lore Olympus has multiple episodes that follow other gods and even mortals. Season 2 of Hardcore Leveling Warrior doesn't even have Ethan in it. The story continues not because of the characters, but because how the new and old characters continue to influence the world, and how the world continues to influence them. Blood Ink itself is about changing laws. Unordinary is about the question of the hierarchy. Hardcore Leveling Warrior is more than just a group of guilds fighting each other, it's about protecting the game. But going back to Blue Chair, it's not any of that. No world is being changed, no development occurs, it's simply jokes, haha funnies, nonsense. You could change the characters of Blue Chair, and it wouldn't be the same. It's hard to find a chapter that isn't about Sheen, that doesn't have Small Ghost or Dave or Vibebot or Protagonist or Evil Sheen, or Life. There are comics that don't have any of them, but they're almost always under a different name, like Owlturd, or under weird explanations of what business casual means. The point is that nonsense relies heavily on characters, while story relies heavily on the world. But that doesn't explain why I like Blue Chair so much, why I like it just as much as webtoons with intricate stories, engaging character dialogue, cool fight scenes, and memorable and emotional moments. What makes me like this fight between Hardcore Leveling Warrior as his number one past self versus Team Light the same amount as, well, this? I think I already explained it. Why do we like Blue Chair just as much as any other story-driven webtoon? It's because it doesn't have intricate stories. It doesn't have engaging character dialogue. It doesn't have cool fight scenes, or it doesn't have memorable and emotional moments. I touched on this in my last video, but all forms of entertainment try extremely hard to be complex, intricate, emotional, engaging. They try to wrap you in their story, trying to make you think of every possible little detail. This channel is a testament to how intricate these webtoons can be. And it isn't a bad thing. In fact, I think it's a good thing. But there can be too much of a good thing. Maybe it's just me, but I get nervous every time I read the new Unordinary. I get anxious every time I read the new Lore Olympus. I get worried every time I read the new Hardcore Leveling Warrior. Because their world means a lot to me. Because I'm emotionally invested into their world, into their stories, their characters, their actions, and their victories. But it comes to a certain point where I start stressing out about webtoon characters, webtoons themselves. Like Scorching Romance's really confusing story romance plots. Random Chat's literally constant betrayal. My deepest secrets, sometimes very dark themes. The themes of webtoons like Let's Play or Love. And most of those are just my Tuesday webtoons. The point is that maybe I'm the only one who feels this stress, this worry, this much anxiety over the newest chapter of webtoons. Maybe I'm the only one getting so emotionally attached and I'm getting nervous about it. But Blue Chair doesn't have any of that. It doesn't have any stress, any anxiety, any worries, any fear. Whenever I read the newest chapter of Blue Chair, there's usually just one thing on my mind. Nonsense. It's joy, humor, happiness. How incredibly strange this webtoon is. I mean, look at this most recent episode. It's just pure nonsense. Look at the one before. It's still nonsense. And I love it. I love how many salsa jars he seemingly has. I love that he keeps on sitting in this really old blue chair. I love how buff life is. How nonsensical every bit of Blue Chair is. So here's to you, Sheen, king of nonsense. So why do you like Blue Chair? Am I the only one who gets stressed out about webtoons? What should I talk about next? Because with videos like this, I can finally talk about webtoons that don't fit my standard of webtoons. Oh, and Blue Chair has recently hit, I think, 6 years. So good on you, Sheen. 6 years strong. But, like always, thank you for watching.